Namaste and kia ora. I'm Christine Maiden-Sharp, Chief Executive of the Aspen Institute New Zealand, and together with our partner Ananta Aspen, we're delighted to welcome you to the third of a series of dialogues between our two countries. Our purpose is to turbocharge the relationship by opening new channels for collaboration through the Institute's international network. In our forum today, Sustainable Food Futures, we'll explore how New Zealand's expertise in farming, agriculture, and agritech can support India's Make in India campaign and help revolutionize its food supply chain. We aim to identify 3 takeaways that you, the audience, can run with. 1, the scope and scale of India's food revolution. 2, where the opportunities are in R&D, skills, and technology. And 3, examples of mutually beneficial business models. We're honoured to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Nita Bhushan, High Commissioner of India to New Zealand, to make the opening remarks, and our panellists. And from India, we welcome Pramit Pal Chowdhury, India Practice Head for Eurasia Group and Fellow at the Ananta Aspen Centre, with a global view on the macro issues including climate change, agricultural diversification, and structural changes. Dr. Bagheera Chowdhury, founder and director of South Asia Biotech, with a long-term focus on agriculture, the mother of the country, including developing bio-innovations from lab to the land. And from New Zealand, we welcome Amit Gupta, Group CEO and founder, Ecosystem Group, chair of TIE Global, who's on a mission to feed the world by leveraging agritech and blended finance. Jeff Allott, Executive Director and founder of Quality New Zealand, operating in India for over 11 years across 43 cities, specializing in supply chain solutions and adding value through agritech education. Moderating the discussion, we're in the able hands of Kartiki Randhawa from Ananta Aspen. Kartiki will lead the conversation for the next 40 minutes when we'll open the floor to questions, and we encourage you to send your questions through the chat line. Over to you, Kartiki.
Hi, thank you, Christine, and I welcome everyone to the Roundtable on Sustainable Food Futures. It's a pleasure to have all of you here, and as we embark on this crucial journey, and look forward to an insightful discussion today. So, as you're aware, today's conversation will talk about how New Zealand's knowledge in farming and agri-tech can help India's Make in India campaign and transform its food supply chain. The goal here is to create a lasting partnership between both countries by using the advanced technologies and the sustainable methods to produce and distribute high-quality food efficiently and securely. As Christine mentioned, we are privileged to be joined by the High Commissioner of India to New Zealand, Ms. Nita Bhushan, to open the session and set the stage for the discussion. Following the High Commissioner's remarks, we will hear from our 4 distinguished speakers. So without any further ado, High Commissioner, may I request you to give your opening remarks?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Namaste and kia ora, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Let me start by thanking the Ananta Aspen Center, Christine, and you, Krituki, for organizing this. And I would like to start by saying that this discussion is very timely. This is a time when both India and New Zealand have been working a lot with each other on various issues, and we see this transformation in our partnership to coming to this level. We have a lot of high-level visits happening, and as you probably have seen in the media, that the President of India, Honorable Her Excellency Srimati Draupadi Murmu, will be visiting New Zealand shortly. Before that, we've seen a series of visits to India from Honorable Todd McLay, and earlier the Foreign Minister, Right Honorable Winston Peters, just to name a few, and a number of visits are in the pipeline. So it is very clear to everyone that discussions are taking place at the highest level to find out ways how both countries can work together for a sustainable future. I think both countries realize that in this present scenario, when there are several conflicts in various parts of the world, we've seen disruptions during COVID time, and essentially, it is absolutely essential for us to work together, learn from each other, and participate in each other's initiatives and campaigns. On this note, I would like to say that traditionally, New Zealand has been exporting some, number of primary products to India, and any discussion on, the fact that we have to work together on food security refers somewhat to the ongoing trade as well. But what we have seen is now that the discussions have started shifting to sectoral collaborations and cooperations and value-added products. So in this regard, it is absolutely, I would say, right to say that New Zealand has the skills and India has the scale. With a population of 1.4 billion people, we are the most populous country in the world. And at the same time, a growing middle class ensures that there is a huge market as well for New Zealand products. In terms of how we can work together, I would just like to mention that we are already working together a lot in several sectors, such as livestock and disease management, use of technology in farms, sharing of best practices to feed, milk, and for testing and other veterinary issues. Some New Zealand companies like Abacus Bio are already in India working on goat genetics and breeding programs. Winseed is in India selling carrot, beetroot, and other vegetable seeds in India. What is really interesting is that several New Zealand companies are setting up bases and participating in the Make in India initiative, adding value, learning from the local conditions, employing people, and then, selling to various outlets in India itself. So I think these provide a perfectly, win-win situations. I have, in my tenure here, seen a large number of delegations coming from India in the dairy and food sector, and similarly, New Zealand business delegations going to India. And what has also excited me is that there is connect between our research institutions, and they are looking at what is being developed in India, what is being done, and how India can take or learn more from New Zealand in these areas. Binson Farms, we know that Earl Rattray, who was the former chair of India New Zealand Business Council, he set up a farm which supplies food and milk to areas near Delhi and Gurugram. And in fact, several state governments have visited, and they are and have entered into memorandums of understanding on such products. So I think the realization is very much there that we need to, like-minded countries like India need to work together, and that we have to explore greater opportunities. And I'm very, happy to note that both Indian companies are investing so much in New Zealand, and in New Zealand companies taking part in India, and especially in the Make in India initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for those insightful remarks. So without delaying anything, let's jump right in. So Jeff, I'll come to you first. Since you've mentioned that you have 11 years of experience with the agricultural products, can you shed some light on how New Zealand adapted to this evolving agribusiness landscape, and what does this evolution portend for the India-New Zealand trade relationship?
Thanks, Kartiki, and namaskar, kia ora, everybody. Christine, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the panel, but more importantly, actually, for exposure to the Indian opportunities as a whole. What we've found over the last 11 years is that storytelling has been hard, creating awareness of what is actually going on already between our countries. And telling that story has been relatively difficult, and it's tremendous to see now the momentum, that our governments are creating. I just want to make a special mention before I answer the question to acknowledge Her Excellency Anita Bhushan as well. Not only is she a significant supporter and advocate of closer relationships between our countries, but on a personal company level, she has gone well beyond what you'd expect from someone so busy. But so we're very grateful for that. To answer the question, yeah, the 11 years hasn't always been smooth sailing. We've seen, though, unbelievable change happening, and the momentum is picking up all the time. For those people that are and have been to India in the last year or two, you will have noticed a change even from 5 years or so ago. For us, it was about doing due diligence in the market to understand how we could be successful in India, and largely that meant that we had to understand local needs, and I think that applies to what we're talking about, what the topic of conversation is today. It's all very well having the technology and it's all very well having the systems, but if we don't actually ask the question of what is required, how can we have the biggest impact and really get in and understand within India what those assets might be that we can supply and collaborate with, then we're not doing justice to the Indian opportunity. And so for us, we ended up setting up a business in India. We now, to Her Excellency's point, we now have a factory in India where we're adding value to our imported product from the Alliance Group and our 5,000 farmers. So from that, it's a matter of being able to localize product. It's being able to build direct relationships and customers with customers, I should say. And it's about having that day-to-day eyes and ears from our senior leadership team, who are feeding back and helping with our decision-making. So we think that understanding the local needs is a massive point. And of course, the other part is building partnerships and relationships. And it's basic, and we understand that. But coming into market once or twice a year just doesn't cut it. You have to be in the market as often as you can, and preferably, I believe, with relationships within India. That is the catalyst to then building that rapport, building respect, and actually, ironically, building trust. And that's the big thing that will then enable stronger, deeper relationships. And I had dinner actually last night with up in Lucknow, and it was a really interesting point that was made. The first question I was told that was when I was going in to see some senior ministers was, they will want to know exactly why you're here and how you are going to actually add value. And it's an absolutely fair point. We need to be coming to India with some solutions, some reasons as to how we can add value to India before we start putting our hand out and taking. So that's probably a couple of insights into our journey. Our journey includes also an education vertical now, where talent transformation is very important. And of course, that comes across in both agri-tech and ed-tech. And we see enormous opportunities with the government, obviously the Indian government putting a huge focus on education. And we're incredibly excited. I think we now have over 107 institutions that are signed up who are extremely interested in some forms of collaboration. And we're really proud of those connections. So that's another opportunity. And I think in being in market once again, it allows you, as I mentioned before, to build that rapport and relationships directly.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'll come back to you. But for now, let's go to Bhagirath. As you mentioned, your organization brings agri-tech and agri-tech to the farmers. So since you're involved in both the R&D and its implementation, can you tell us what are the current challenges that the farmers are facing locally? And if there is any technology, what kind of technology solutions are being deployed?
Thank you, Kartiki. So first of all, I want to thank Christine from the Spain, also the Ananta Center. I want to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency, Madam Bhushan, my fellow panelists, and all those who joined from India and New Zealand. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Before I go to your question, I would like to really highlight something that relates to agriculture and today's topic. Agriculture and allied sectors can be livestock, fisheries, or forestries. It is a backbone of 1.4 billion Indians, actually. And 60% of them actually makes their income and livelihood from agriculture. So the magnitude and enormity of the sector can be understood by the involvement of the Indians in agriculture and food sectors. India currently, agriculture contributes almost 17 to 18% of the GDP, which if you really look at in terms of the dollars, it's close to 402 billion US dollar. And that 17-18% is close to $3 trillion economy that we have for the country. Government of India estimates that Indian agriculture will become $1 trillion economy. That's a $1,000 billion economy by 2030. And having said the potential for the agriculture, government has been taking enormous steps in last 2.5 decades that I closely follow. And I would like to really highlight those very important steps that why countries like India and New Zealand should collaborate more, strengthen their collaborative opportunities, bring people and those who are into farming and systems and technologies and entrepreneurs together to see that those $1 trillion opportunity by 2030 can be harnessed jointly by these two countries. So I would like to actually highlight 4 very important areas of development that's happening in the country, which might be very useful for people who have joined today. So number 1 is that the government has taken decisive actions on long-term pending policy and regulatory matters, whether it's related to market access or free trade agreements. We have seen sea change happening in both market access and also on the free trade agreements that India is embarking on journey with related to agriculture and food. This is very important simply because India's agriculture remain protected for since independence. So that change is very, very important for the companies and institutions to recognize. Secondly, India is creating this very enormous digital public infrastructure. We have seen digitization of transactions, supply chain happening rapidly at both rural and urban level. Urban level that used to happen, but rural economy is becoming part and parcel because of this public digital infrastructure in agriculture and rural sector. So that's a very second important regulatory developments or policy development that we see in the country. Thirdly, we are also building up tremendous social respect for people engaged in economy. So farming community, we have close to 140 crore, that's a 14 million farmers who are engaged into agriculture. And I think that is motivating and mobilizing them to go beyond their very systems of working in a narrow setting in the country. So that respect is also bringing the whole rural India to the mainline economy of the country. And last but not the least, Government of India has been putting up close to $15 billion worth of investment in agriculture welfare schemes, where they are not only transferring money to the farming community, but also building up projects and programs that are very important to increase the competitiveness of Indian agriculture. So that's, and finally, close to $1.5 billion worth of R&D investment in agriculture infrastructure. So these 5-6 very important development that I've seen, I think it enables and allows us to see how best we can harness the opportunity between these two countries. I would like to come to your question directly now, and I'll not take much time. In India, we have a National Agriculture Research System. It comprises of Indian Agriculture Research Institution, state agriculture industries, and large number of private sectors that is very much engaged as Honorable Her Excellency mentioned. We have very robust seed sector, biotechnology sector, livestock, fisheries, forestries, tremendous number of institutions. My institution has a long-term collaboration with Indian Council of Agriculture Research, and we are trying to see how best we can help farming community to produce better quality, high-value crops. For example, spices. We work very closely with large number of farmers who are engaged in spices sector. New Zealand is one of all very important market for Indian spices, both seed spices as well as other spices. And we are also trying to see that how best we can take technologies that can help to address the mounting challenges of climate change where they see changing in pest dynamics, the quality is being deteriorated. So how do you enable farming communities so that they can produce better quality goods that can then be part and parcel of the major exports of agri-commodity that are happening from India? To the group, finally, I would like to say that in last few years, India's export has also happening at a very high level. We achieved $50 billion worth of agri-commodity export, and we are doing close to $4.5 billion worth of spices trade from the country. I believe there are tremendous opportunities exist in the whole agriculture landscape, agro ecosystem that is being built up as part of the Make in India program for the country, to see how best India and New Zealand can collaborate to further increase both countries' participation in $2 trillion international trade in agriculture commodity that we have. So I would be very happy to suggest some of the measures that I believe are very important to further strengthen these collaborative opportunities as our president visits New Zealand in the future, so that farmers, researchers, and the entrepreneurs can come together and build this longest bridge between India and New Zealand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhagirath. So I'll come back to you, but Amit, I wanted to ask you that, I mean, can you take this conversation forward in a more bilateral space? And I mean, comment on, why New Zealand is the best partner for India, for agri-tech and for agri-finance. And how can we build a tech ecosystem to support our mutual goals?
Well, thank you, Kartiki. First of all, namaste, kia ora, Your Excellency, High Commissioner Nita Bhushan, thank you so much for taking the time. Christine and team from Aspen and Ananta, my fellow panelists and the attendees, thank you for this very meaningful discussion. So maybe I'll sort of frame some context around this, Kartiki. I think I will be wary of saying that this is the best partnership possible. I will probably look at it from a biased lens. So I'm an Indian New Zealander living in Singapore. And sometimes when you sit outside, you get a much better external perspective on the opportunities and challenges. And when I look at both India and New Zealand, they have such tremendous strengths that, in my view, there was collaboration that could enable these nations to work together, not just to solve for India and New Zealand and bilateral trade. Because I think, the world we're living in today needs to go a lot beyond trade. There has to be some serious purpose behind this. And I genuinely believe that if you pull these two strengths together of these nations, there is an opportunity to take that beyond India and New Zealand to solve for global hunger. And maybe I'll frame some context if that's okay. High Commissioner referenced food security, and I think it's a major issue, not just for emerging countries or developing countries. I think it's a major issue for the developed economies as well, because we can't be taking that for granted. And if you look at, let me start first with trade between India and New Zealand. I think it's really promising to see that more steps are being taken from New Zealand's standpoint to put emphasis on India. And I think, let's be very real. India is a $1.4 billion country. It is the fastest growing economy in the world. Everyone wants to be in India. I think, to be fair, I think New Zealand's been a little bit late. I think this is on New Zealand to try and tap into that market. And equally for India to leverage the potential strengths that New Zealand can bring. So I think it's still not too late. And I think with the efforts that are taking place now, especially over the last 12 months for this bilateral trade, I think presents a tremendous amount of opportunity. Now, when we look at agri-tech, the first thing you've got to consider is, let's look at New Zealand. New Zealand has a disproportionate agrarian economy. I mean, it's a nation of 5 million people that, at least in some of the sectors, is the largest, if not the largest, in the top 3 exporters in the world, right, within the agriculture field. And how do you achieve that? How has New Zealand achieved that? It hasn't happened because New Zealand built some technology, some very innovative technology over the last few decades, and it's the way of life, right? You have to look back historically And sometimes, innovation stems from your own limitations and trying to overcome those limitations. And New Zealand's innovation around the agriculture economy started over 100 years ago when New Zealand invented refrigerated shipping, right? So for context, you have to look at the mindset of the economy. So innovation is a mindset. It's not something you build overnight. If you look at where does this technology come in and what does it solve? With 5 million people, you have to have technology that augments that human resource to have that level of yield, right? So everything from using the technology, whether it's modern technology like IoT and drone technology, weather patterns, understanding how to get greater yield, as well as best practice in agriculture, driving greater yield. There's also a big focus on optimizing supply chains. How do you make sure you build the strongest supply chains, not just from a technology perspective, but from a real physical supply chain standpoint? How do you build those supply chains across the different markets? And the third, of course, is the ability to process at source. And when I say process at source, and I will talk about how does New Zealand actually contribute to India in terms of processing, and I think I'll share some context from what I know about what Jeff's company is doing and how that could benefit both countries. But I think the opportunity for New Zealand is to take that innovation, best practices, and find a foothold to collaborate with India. The opportunity in India is India has world-class public digital infrastructure. Everyone wants, in emerging countries, everyone is looking at India's public digital infrastructure. India is now playing a role to help support emerging nations build that, right? So the opportunity for New Zealand today and India is to leverage each other specifically around their strengths. So New Zealand's strength is being a technology and innovation-enabled agrarian economy. And the strength for India is that it has immense digital capacity as the world's digital hub. And as you can see from the rollout of the digital public infrastructure, has the ability to roll out at scale. So how do you take that R&D capability that New Zealand brings, and India is doing a lot of R&D as well, as as Bhagirath also mentioned. How do you combine those capabilities together, create one collaborative ecosystem, taking the best of both the economies, place it in India, help solve for uplifting the agrarian economy in India, because India itself has a lot of strengths, specifically around supply chain. You're seeing a lot of Indian tech companies that are building very, very strong supply chain capabilities. Some of the most promising high growth digital supply chain companies globally are actually emerging from India, like companies like FarEye and Moglix, and there's many, many examples. So if you bring those capabilities, you have the opportunity to first start in India, increase the yield and production for farmers, allow to minimize spoilage so that you can actually get as much optimized produce from farm to fork. And third, enable the farmers to process at source so that they can move up the value chain. Because eventually, everything that we do in digital has to have an impact around capacity building. And we have to impact the lives of these farmers, right? And that these farmers contribute the biggest part of India's economic contribution from a population standpoint. So how can we enable that? An example would be what Zespri has been striving to do, is to help build processing capabilities with their fruit production and enabling that. I believe it's in Himachal. I'm not sure. I can't recall now. But I would say if New Zealand wants better success, and this is where I might be a little bit controversial, I think we have to decouple it from the actual food product. Decouple the tech best practice technology, whether it's supply chain for yield or for processing, from the actual product, right? It's great that Zespri is doing it, but then it's not going to create impact at scale. I think the opportunity is bring the technology capabilities. New Zealand has a very, very vibrant agri-tech ecosystem. And we should look at that. The New Zealand government should look at that and see how can they bring the best of that, bring that to India, couple that with the best of the digital capabilities and the companies we have in India, because there's some amazing work happening there. There's a lot of work happening within the IITs and the IIMs, for example. Can that collaboration stem into one commercial arm that can actually then roll it out in India and then take it to the world? So a little bit of an idealistic view, but I do think it's very much possible, because there is a need in India and because there is hunger in New Zealand today to tap into that market. And this, to me, is the best way for New Zealand to benefit and tap into the Indian economy.
Okay, thank you so much, Amit. I'll get back to that point for sure. So I'll turn to Promit now and take this and take it to an international cooperation angle. So Promit, can you talk about India's current agricultural collaboration with Israel and the US? And are there any lessons that we can learn from there? And also, how can you see New Zealand become a valuable partner in India, for a partner for India in this space? I mean, how do you view New Zealand to become a partner?
So yeah, thank you. So a couple of points. I think the first thing to just quickly sketch out where I see some of the coming challenges for agriculture and for the Indian government's own priorities. One, the original Green Revolution strategy of India, which was to generate huge amounts of grain, wheat and rice, basically, to solve what was endemic famine problems. India had famines all the way till the 1960s. And so that became the primary focus of Indian agriculture. Obviously, we've now moved away from that. We have, if anything, excess amounts of grain. And the problem with the Green Revolution structures are they're basically no longer sustainable in terms of the water, especially, but even things on the consumption of fertilizer and so on. So we're now seeing the government agricultural policy slowly shifting slowly because there are obviously political issues with interest groups built around certain types of agricultural processes. One is the issue of inflation, food inflation. Originally, it was protein inflation, I think, was the big issue. Still is a problem. As people get richer, they consume more and more protein. That's clearly happening in India. Even with a population that's a roughly 40% vegetarian, legumes, soya are issues as far as that type of production. Poultry, by far the fastest growing protein source in the country right now, and dairy. Dairy, of course, is the other big thing. In fact, the explosion in dairy consumption in India has been one of the big shifts that we've seen as Indians have become wealthier across the country, and especially for vegetarians, this is a key source of protein for them. And then the other issue now is a new issue that's come on top of this, if you wish, is climate. We've clearly seen heat waves over the past 3-4 years, past 2 years in particular, temperatures reaching, especially northern India, reaching about 48 degrees, 50 degrees. This last heat wave that we have was also extremely interesting from a purely scientific, but alarming in one sense. While some crops, notably wheat, are very heat sensitive, most of the others, rice and so on, are actually quite resistant. But it requires a simple requirement in, if you wish, for most crops and vegetables, is that there has to be a period in the nighttime when temperatures fall again. If they get about 4 or 5 hours of cool temperature, most plants can handle a heat wave in the daytime. We are not seeing that taking place anymore. That 4 or 5 hour cooling period at night is increasingly shrinking. It's now less than 4 hours, and we've been starting to experience that in Northwest India this year in particular. And we saw 20% of India's vegetable crop in these areas literally get wiped out. This is now a crucial area because this is a tipping point as far as agricultural production is concerned. If that lack of that nighttime cooling period continues and spreads, India's agricultural production will collapse. And this is true not just for India, but so we need to be developing technologies. We are developing technologies, but obviously this now has to be done on a more rapid phase. So you have a whole set of technologies that now are required. I think right now in the monsoon harvest that is being sown, about 25% of the harvest is climate-resistant seed technologies that have been developed that are to some degree experimental, but we need to accelerate this on a much faster level. Genomic technologies, for example, though regrettably, I think the Indian court system has asked for a very complicated genetic modification regulatory structure, which I think will slow that down. But there are other technologies in the hybrid area and so on that need to be carried out. So you see on the protein inflation side, that's one story. You see on the climate side, the others have already mentioned agricultural value, working up the agricultural value chain. On the dairy, this is related to climate, but somewhat ancillary, is the issue of methane production. If India is producing actually surplus milk powder production, we have massive surpluses, which have to probably begin exporting at some point. We already started that game. A lot of that will have to be green. Eventually, as it enters certain markets and global trading structures become more green-oriented, that dairy production needs to green. And we know New Zealand is one of the world leaders in controlling methane production on that front. So, and then finally on the structural side, which feeds into the several issues I've already mentioned, agricultural value chains, for example. One simple problem we're facing, the banking system of India doesn't know how to evaluate agricultural value chains. They have no clue because they've never had to worry about this. They were basically only concerned about bulk commodities and subsidy structures. But you talk to bankers about this, they said, we don't actually know how to evaluate an agricultural value chain. We don't know how to finance it, because if we can't evaluate it, there's no way for us to tell. We need help. We need other banks to come and tell us, how do you do an agricultural value chain? Because otherwise we don't know how to finance this within India, forget about anywhere else. And this is something in New Zealand's already done, is far ahead of. The government, as some of you will know, is launching a huge program. They passed the acts of reviving India's once very vibrant farming cooperative structure. We've had some obviously big successes, Amul Dairy, obviously, but there are thousands, tens of thousands of cooperatives in India, many of which have fallen into disarray and are ceased to function. There's going to be a huge drive to cooperate, to revive this. So all of these are elements of a new agricultural policy, which other people have also mentioned, including a huge push for an agricultural technology, partly because of climate, partly because of changing food habits. Now, other countries, Israel, for example, has been very big in this area. It has set up, I've forgotten, 14 centers of agricultural excellence across the country, specializing in different crops, different areas. What Israel is famous for and has sold itself to the country is it's the water superpower of the world, that in terms of water, wastewater, recycling, even a technology like detecting leaking water pipes, they are the world leaders on a quantum level, better than almost anybody else. And this is known within the government. I once met an Israeli ambassador who'd come out meeting Prime Minister Modi, and I asked him, was a discussion about terrorism or defense? He says, no, it was 50% water. All your prime minister talked about was water, water. I need Israel to help me on water. And so, you have therefore a brand, and Israel has built on this. The other country I should mention is Netherlands. Netherlands is very similar to New Zealand, I think, in terms of its agroclimatic condition. Everybody knows it's an enormous food exporter. Given its size, it's phenomenal, I think, on a parity with New Zealand. And they've also, even a little bit more quietly, been focusing on vegetable production, increasing productivity. And what is interesting now, you're starting to see this showing up in the shops in India, in supermarkets in India. I live in a suburb of Delhi, Noida. When I go to my local supermarket, I will actually get bags of vegetables saying Netherlands technology, Dutch technology on them. On Diwali, on the holiday season, the Israeli embassy will send boxes of Israeli grown vegetables to your home as a gift. The only New Zealand element is Zespri. You see them very clearly marketing their New Zealand kiwi fruit in that shop, but it's mainly Zespri. The New Zealand part's a little on the small side in the small font. But I'm saying these are some of the elements we're starting to see, and I can see New Zealand coming into this at some point. A lot of this is there, and I think hopefully we'll start to see some of that come to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Promit. So I think we have some more time for another round of questions, but I'm going to ask Jeff and Amit a common question. So both of you can answer. Why is it essential for New Zealand to develop a long-term strategic plan? I mean, from 10 to 50 years for trade with India? And how can New Zealand show its commitment to adding value to the Indian communities and the economic performance?
I think I'll
Thanks.
defer to Jeff, who's been committing over the last 10 years. So we'll use that.
Thank you, Amit. Appreciate that. Look, it's actually a question that I'm incredibly passionate about because fundamentally in New Zealand, I think many of our directors who are ultimately in control of company strategic plans very much operate on a short-term timeframe. So, you know, we're measuring our CEOs with 12-month KPIs. But all of us know that India is not a 12-month country. Relationships within India don't take 12 months. So what I would love to see is long-term strategic planning by businesses, by particularly governors of our large agricultural and education and tourism-based companies, because that will enable then a different lens to come across, a different investment lens, a different time commitment lens that then gives you probably a better opportunity of success. That's quite different to how we're currently operating. I'm pleased to see, and I understand certainly that I know that India New Zealand Business Council has put together a strategic plan to present to government, and I understand that government were receptive to that. Which is great. I don't think New Zealand, quite frankly, has had a strategic plan for India. And so, you know, what I really want to see is us all embracing in all our respective industries a coordinated plan, which cuts across MPI, MB, NZTE, all of our government services, as well as business, exporters and agricultural producers, both product and service. Then we start to have a chance. And I think some really interesting, fascinating points that have been raised here. Some of those points we need to prioritize. Climate change is having a massive effect on all of us. Education is something that the Indian government are incredibly passionate about and want and must have change on. And New Zealand can play a massive role in that. So as soon as I think we articulate a really clear strategic plan, it'll also then dilute any hesitation from both sides that we're coming in with a different mandate or we're coming in for a different purpose, other than to mutually or to have mutual benefit for both countries. And so, you know, that's I'm a massive advocate. Long-term planning, long-term strategic awareness. And a commitment, particularly, I'll put it back on our New Zealand directors of our large institutions to educate themselves, come into market, see the opportunities, speak to the experts. Then this country will go forward.
Yeah, and if I may just add, and you know, I'm not trying to promote Jeff's company, but I think Jeff's company is a great example of what that long-term commitment means, right? So Quality New Zealand has been in India, I believe, since 2013, if not longer. And now, with your ability that, you know, you've created this new capability to process in India, which means you're creating employment in India. You're basically creating the value addition in India, which means you're competitive with your products and you're able to ensure that you can tap into the market. And that probably explains why you have a majority stake of the market that you play in, right? So, and puts New Zealand as the market leader in that segment. So I think there is that proven model. I will say that, from a, sometimes, just to add to what Jeff said, the long-term view, we have to look back historically a little bit, right? So India does not need New Zealand. Let's be very clear. India has many options today, right? And I'm not trying to trivialize it. India does have many options. It's a very competitive environment that everyone wants to be in India. New Zealand has $1 billion plus, 1 billion people plus market left to tap. And New Zealand has to tap that, right? And it's a little bit late in the game. And I think there's a reason for that. I think, as Jeff mentioned, educating the companies, I think the perception, you have to understand the socioeconomic build of nations, especially immigrant nations. And you have to look at other nations like the US and the UK compared to New Zealand. New Zealand is still first generation immigrant population coming in. So the perception of India within New Zealand, while New Zealand is a very respectful country and very open-minded, very respectful, their exposure to India is what they see of the immigrant population in India today, which is now moving up the value chain, but it takes time. In the US and UK, that immigrant population is now third generation. That wealth has been created. Indians are the richest ethnic group in the US per capita and has the highest contribution of CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world, including some of the largest tech companies. And we all know that, right? New Zealand has not seen that. So New Zealand is looking at that from a very external lens. So their perception of India has been based on what they see in the media, or what they might see in movies, where everything, gets a little bit trivialized. So, but I think now there is clarity that there is a lot of opportunity in India. And I think that focus has started. But I think they will have to look at it from a long-term lens because, as I said, India has many options. I mean, Pramit just shared 2 examples of Israel and Netherlands. And I was going to say, I mean, Netherlands is actually, New Zealand is second after Netherlands in terms of the agrarian economy per capita. And so if they're already in there, it's already a little bit late for New Zealand. But I think the opportunity has to be looked at very, very clearly. It cannot be based on what New Zealand wants to do. It has to be based on what India needs. So I think that lens has to be reversed. And Pramit, you gave a great example of alternative foods like food tech. New Zealand has a very vibrant food tech ecosystem, and New Zealand needs that food tech ecosystem because livestock-based produce creates its own risks and challenges. And looking at the huge vegetarian population in India, what a great opportunity if you could collaborate between those 2 ecosystems around food tech. So let's just start with protein-based food to tap into that market. But then eventually you have to take a long-term view, build for India, but then also help India export using New Zealand's existing supply chains and customer and consumer supply chains to the rest of the world. So I think it has to be a 2-way process. It will, if it's about transacting and getting lots of business from India today, I think it's the wrong place for New Zealand to target. I think if it's about joint wealth creation and solving for a bigger problem that goes beyond India and New Zealand, I think the opportunity is there. And I think India will be very open to it because if you see India's playing a very large role in trying to solve for that globally. And I think that approach from New Zealand will appeal to India.
Okay, thank you so much, Amit and Jeff, for that answer. Also, before I go to the panelist for the next question, I'd like to remind the audience that there's a Q&A window right next to the chat button where they can add their questions. So moving on, so there's a combined question for Pramit and Bhagirath. Both of you have already made your references to this, but I like to add a little bit more and get more out of the 2 of you. So what role does biodiversity play in India's agricultural strategy? Pramit talked about heat waves and the challenges of climate change to the Indian agricultural system. Do challenges of biosecurity and quarantine measures play into this? And what are the biggest problems? And to that, I mean, add the bilateral element again. Are there any particular R&D partnerships that India and New Zealand should embark on to find solutions to these challenges?
It's right. So thank you, Kartiki. I think I get incredible convergence of ideas that I just heard Amit, Jeff on Prameet. And I would like to build up the argument for next 2-3 minutes about what possibly is doable in the near future, near to mid future between India and New Zealand. I believe, and based on the understanding that I have from the ground, working closely with smallholder, large number of farming community in the country, I think they are facing a trica of challenges, which I think we need to see how best we can bilaterally work together to overcome those challenges. So first one emanate from what Prameet has said. How do we safeguard the production of green revolution technologies? Safeguarding food grain production is, I think, most critical before we embark on the journey to look at other aspects of nutrition or any other aspects of feeding 1.4 billion people. So the second very important areas of Parmeet touched about the protein deficiency, or there is a quest for the consumer to go for high protein products for predominantly a vegetarian economy. So I think working on nutritional security component, as India is facing tremendous challenges with malnutrition issues at lower strata in the society, I think we need to look at biofortification, not only at the grain breeding stages, but also look at viable tools and technologies to deliver those micronutrient enriched material to the consumer. That's the second biggest challenge that I see. The third one is about, and I want to take back to Parmeet about the climate change. And that very much relates to what Karthiki had just now asked about the interaction between food production, biodiversity, and this whole concepts of climate change, which is not very much understood by those who really produce food for the country. I have seen for last couple of years, and I want to go beyond these heat waves that we have just now discussed. We have seen the changing pest and disease dynamics in the country. That's really taking a toll on our ability to produce food per unit area that we have been producing over a period of time. So my institutions, and I want to give reference to some of these very big, because of climate change, probably we have this influx of new pests and diseases that is affecting the whole production system. So, and that's where I would like to refer back to the ability of New Zealand, that how they have been keeping their country free from all kind of these invasive influx of pests and diseases. So there must be some legislative mechanisms which is being implemented at a level where your border security or your quarantine measures or your systems that foolproof your country from these kind of diseases that come inside and then create havoc. India being such a huge agroclimatic diverse country, such very invasive pest creates really big problem for the food production. And we've seen it affecting not only vegetable like chili production, which is one of the star export product for the country. We are facing problem with corn production, cotton production because of these changes. So one, I would like to suggest that anything on quarantine and safeguarding the bilateral programs between Indian quarantine and New Zealand, and see how best we can adopt best practices that are being implemented in New Zealand to see that in future India could detect these kind of pests at the border before they enter into
I think we lost him. There must be some network issue. Pramit, I mean, once he joins back, he can continue the answer. Would you want to?
Yeah, so there's a whole set of technologies that are available on agriculture, responding to a whole set of different issues. And so the game is to basically use as many of them as possible. None of them is a silver bullet. Genetic modification is not a solution for everything. Hybridization is not a solution for everything. Biodiversity, the use of different crops, using just biodiversity techniques, But what Dr. Chaudhary is mentioning, I think is also very important, is agroclimatic changes take place. You're actually seeing entire climate belts shift upwards or downwards, depending on what's happening on the ground. And farmers in those areas have to adjust. They have to learn how to grow a completely different set of crops, let alone handle a different set of pesticides. And this is an entire training program, a learning process that is both expensive because your infrastructure is effectively designed for the wrong thing. You have the wrong pesticide knowledge and information. And you need to do this because you can't really afford to have 2 or 3 crops fail before you understand how this change takes place. Farmers know that it's changing, they don't know how to respond. Surveys in India have shown that 40% of farmers in India say, yeah, there's rain, plenty of rain coming, but we no longer can predict when it's coming. So that means sowing becomes a big issue for us because we don't know when to sow anymore. Or if you're growing different types of rice, for example, require different types of water predicated on that. So one of the areas we can mention, and I think 2 areas I'll just mention in terms of taking cooperation further, was mentioned earlier that remember in India, agriculture is fundamentally a state government issue. Central government provides guidance, it can provide funding, it can do things like research. But ultimately, it's the state governments that control or decide and implement agricultural policy. This is something Israel, for example, has done very well. They have invited endless streams of chief ministers from the state governments of India. At one point, I think they actually the Israelis showed me a list. They said we have gotten something like 20 out of the existing 26 of the chief ministers of India have all visited Israel at one point or another. And because politics in India, except in city-states like Delhi, is fundamentally rural, for them, this is a political priority to be able to go back and say, look, I've got a solution to the water problems of sugar farmers in my state. And what Israel also did is they worked out, and because New Zealand will have a little slightly greater problem. New Zealand is very far away, so it takes a while to persuade somebody to fly all the way to New Zealand. But what the Israelis did, even they whose distances, they chose a couple of districts in sort of pilot areas, Rayalaseema in Telangana and so on, and made them sort of hubs for examples of what Israel can do in agriculture. And say, look, this is what we can do in water, this is what we can do in growing vegetables, this is what we do in terms of increasing productivity. They even had a center for mango production because they actually grow mangoes in Israel. They don't have the climate at all. They do it in greenhouses. But they said, we have ways to grow on non-seasonal periods of showing how to do mangoes. It wasn't necessarily that a lot of these were applicable to India. It was just that it was showcasing what Israel could do. And then you could bring in endless numbers of people because it was in India, so the transportation problems are really easy. And again, that's something that should be considered. Another area is New Zealand has very good agricultural universities. We know Auckland, we know Massey, but people don't know necessarily Lincoln University, one of the top 100 agricultural universities in the world, and there are others. The new education policy that Indian government has beginning to roll out now opens the doors for such universities to partner with organizations, even private institutions in India, and set up full campuses. They don't have to set up the full university, but if they want to just focus on the agricultural side, we're already seeing the Australians, Griffiths and others are coming already. They're doing full-fledged university structure. King's College in England is coming as well. But again, something that potentially New Zealand could really be good again, and this gives you New Zealand to showcase its capacities as well as build capacity for India as well.
If I could just add to what both my eminent panelists have said, I think completely agree with the viewpoints around tackling sustainability. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on 3 areas that I think, given that this is an agri-tech session, we haven't actually talked about technology per se. So, and I think technology goes beyond farming practices and farming tools and technology. We're talking about core tech. We're talking about digital. We're talking about areas which are strengths for both New Zealand and India. New Zealand already has the R&D and the capability. India has the ability to roll at scale. So I think it is, and when I say that this is a long-term play, you're not going to be able to get farmers to start using AI and automation tomorrow. Yeah. And to Pramit's point, this is an ecosystem to ecosystem play. This has to be, the governments have to bring together those ecosystems and the best of class organizations to bring that technology together. So whether it's AI and automation, whether it's robotics, whether it's drone technology, analytics, IoT and sensors, all of these, by the way, are hugely, brimming sectors in India as well. But what New Zealand can bring is the specific use cases and applications for agri-tech, right? Because India's use cases are quite broad across these areas. And New Zealand's will be very, very focused on agri-tech. How do you apply that? And then India can help drive that at scale. Now, how do you drive that at scale? I think we touched on capacity building. And I think someone had a question in the audience about skilling. How do you do skilling? Who pays for the skilling? How much of that can come from government? Government can only do as much, especially when you're tackling 1.4 billion people, right? So there are other ways, and I think this is a segue where I want to talk about new mechanisms of creating the financial environment and greater impetus to invest in creating impact, but yet building more profitable businesses. So, the whole notion of blended finance is one that I think, if I would just end with, if India and New Zealand can collaborate, create the right best practices, the skilling, the technology, the rollout, the ability to roll out at scale, there is then an opportunity for this ecosystem together to take it to other markets. And even for India, with blended finance, especially given how much emphasis there is from the World Bank on this instrument. I'm not sure how many of our audience are familiar with blended finance, but it is a means of meshing and blending philanthropy grants, concessional capital, and private capital, so that it actually benefits all three of those capital providers. Because philanthropists want to put money into areas to solve problems, but they're also starting to realize that it has to go into businesses that will get sustained over a period of time, right? And that will actually, but still create the right impact they want to see. That's only possible when there is private capital coming in there as well, because it changes the behavior of the founders, right? And at the same time, for the private capital providers, it actually de-risks the private capital and creates a much larger deployment of capital at scale without compromising shareholder equity, because grants are not going into onto the cap table. So that mechanism is predominantly put in place where you're solving for a specific problem, and that the biggest problem you're solving is capacity building, skilling. And then you build out the whole, you're creating impact across the value chain. So I would just like to say, I think sustainability is a very, very key issue to solve for. And I know it's very important to India and New Zealand, but I also think India has other problems that are much more real. And today we have to solve for people getting food, and we have to solve for reducing the spoilage. 40% of our food gets spoiled in the supply chain, right? If you can just imagine, if you could reduce that, how many people you're able to feed. So I think we have to think of this, and that's why it's long-term. We've got to think of it from a very logical step. What's important for New Zealand, but at the same time, what's important for India, and put that roadmap across. That's sort of my view.
Thank you, Amit. Okay, so Bhagirath, I know you were cut off, but we're glad you joined. And would you like to continue?
Yeah.
And then
Thank you so much. So, to continue this discussion that I was having, I would like to suggest 2 or 3 very important areas of collaboration as a researcher that I see where opportunities between 2 countries can be harnessed to the level that we are discussing just now. As Pramitji mentioned about Israel and Netherlands, I think the low-hanging fruit for bilateral collaboration and I hope Her Excellency is listening to it. I think one of the very important bilateral arrangement on research side that can take place between India and New Zealand is to develop a center of excellence on animal livestock disease forecasting, animal breeding, and dairy development. And that's, I think, is the core competence of New Zealand. And this would go in line with what being done by Israelis to not only help develop capacities of our people to produce good quality vegetables or horticulture produce. We refer to mangoes and all kind of vegetables in Haryana and Rayalaseema and other places. I think this center of excellence concept from New Zealand on and animal disease forecasting, animal breeding, and dairy development can open a new areas of collaboration in whole food value chain, because animal plays very important role in ensuring the nutritional security component that we have in the country. So that's the one pitch that I would like to really make through this particular program. The second important area that I believe that New Zealand should tap, and here it would be New Zealand that would be the biggest beneficiary, is to work in collaboration with Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana, which is, I think, world largest crop insurance scheme that we have in the country. Knowing that New Zealand has expertise in crop animal insurance, rural area insurance, they know how it can be best implemented in very climate susceptible environment. So if we can work out something where our Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana, which is a crop insurance scheme, can be factually delivered in terms of both premium and the risk that farmer face. Because right now we have some areas where implementation is a very big problem. We see a lot of issues with respect to claims being made by the farming community. How do you evaluate those claims at very local level? As climate is changing, those are very spatial kind of damages that we see. So crop insurance is second very important area that I believe is a low-hanging fruit between two countries. And finally, I would like to again buy the idea from Parmeet and say that long-term R&D collaboration on crop, climate resilient crop varieties, or building a very robust R&D collaboration between scientific community of New Zealand and India would be something that would strengthen, that will reduce the distances and bridge the big bridge that we have with Netherlands or with Israel to New Zealand as well. So these are few comments that I would like to really share with the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Jeff, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to pick up. Amit touched on the question that's in the chat as well, and I think it is agri-tech focus, but with that, I think the person that answered the question was spot on. There needs to be a conscious effort around skilled labour and creating opportunities as well to make sure then there's not a void. You might have all the greatest tooling. If you don't have people that are then also being educated at the same speed, then you obviously have that void. So I'd love to see EdTech play a big role, a collaborative role as well. We're involved at the moment already with a number of institutions, but also industries. So the point that's been raised before, there's some of that's already happening, and it's tremendous to see the proactive approach by a few that are doing that, and of course enhancing sort of that employability and global competitiveness of the skilled labour will all add then to the value for India as well. And one thing I want to make that very clear about this is, and I think we've all got to be conscious of this, is the affordability of education. We all know that it's extremely costly for Indians to be educated when the systems aren't already built. So coming up with some innovative ways in which that can be achieved in a really cost-effective manner will also go a long way to adding economic and socioeconomic value to India.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So I think we are almost running out of time. So can I have 1 minute quick closing remarks from all of you? And Jeff, would you like to begin?
Apologies, I thought I did. Look, I just want to again conclude and pass it back really to Christine and her invitation to join this panel. I think I've learned a hell of a lot from listening to it myself. And I think it's tremendous that there is proactivity around more education on India and the relationship between India and New Zealand specifically. I think, we've already had glimpses of what collaboration can do from the speakers. And I think that's the most exciting part. For those of us that have had the pleasure really of being in this country, you see opportunities every day. So, I would just highly encourage anyone that's listening in to this that has even a small interest of finding out a little bit more or getting in touch, please do so. Because there are tremendous opportunities. And to Amit's point, we can have a massive global impact through New Zealand technology combined with the scalability of India and quite frankly, the expertise and know-how of Indians to also get things done. So look, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed being a part of this, Kartiki. Thank you for allowing me to be involved.
Thank you, Jeff. Amit?
Yeah, no, look, I think, again, this is such a large topic for us to cover in this short period and do justice to it, because it requires obviously a lot of deep dives into specific areas. But I will say a few things. I think in terms of partnerships between nations, it's based on values and some common threads. So if you look at India and New Zealand, what is common between India and New Zealand? I think the first one is the common cultural values of the Maori culture and Indian culture. There are a lot of similarities, which you're not going to find, and I'm not trying to pick on any other nation. I think everyone has their own strengths, which you're not going to find in Israel and Netherlands and so on. I think that's one. Second is the love of the common sport. Now, cricket, right? So sport ties nations together. It ties societies together. So I'm trying to take a more sort of pragmatic view of what pulls nations together, right? And India and New Zealand enjoy very, very, very warm relations, at least from a people-to-people perspective. We actually have, I don't want to embarrass Jeff, but we actually have a world record holder in Jeff Allard sitting there, who I don't know how many of you are actually aware that Jeff holds the world record for the maximum number of wickets in a World Cup in 1999 in the Cricket World Cup. So, the third is the love of films. I don't know how many people are actually aware that while India has the largest film industry, New Zealand actually makes some of the biggest blockbuster movies around the world. The Lord of the Rings, Avatar, and there's many more examples. So there is already a lot of common threads. I would say if we had to really look at what can some of the next steps be and what could the priorities be, I just want to focus back on, we talk about agri-tech and we have yet not touched on digital at all on this panel. And I think unless we're talking about digital, it is never going to be relevant to India, because India's biggest strength today is digital. So if you want to solve for something in India, leverage India's biggest strength, because you're creating opportunity for India, right? So I agree with all the other pieces around, livestock, disease prevention, creating the biodiversity. There are many, many learnings from New Zealand, but those are going to be more sort of academic. Whereas what will implement in a commercial scale will be the digital technology implementations. And that's a good place to start. So joint R&D across everything that we talked about today, all the four panelists. Skilling is going to be very critical. And I think New Zealand, with its, like Jeff said, with the universities, and Pramit referenced some of the universities. So there's opportunities to bring that and maybe bring part of Ag Research, which is a New Zealand agency, to bring that capability into India from a skilling and R&D perspective. And the most important one, I will always say, is going to be building digital capacity in India, because that is India's biggest strength. And that's the best place to start and harness. That's my view.
Thank you, Amit. Bhagirath?
Thank you so much. I want to thank Christine, before we go off, for putting together such a wonderful panel. The call to action here, what comes out of this particular discussion that we had. I think, Christine, I would suggest that if you can really come out with even an online forum called Agri-Food Entrepreneurship Forum between India and New Zealand. We will find the market, we will explore it, we will find entrepreneurs, but we need that kind of platform where engagement like this can continue. That platform can also be used to influence the governments, because since a lot of bilateral engagements are happening, as we heard from Her Excellency. So such kind of forum where you bring entrepreneurs together in agri-food value chain would be the biggest outcome of this particular forum. And I hope that a person with huge quest for agriculture innovation. I traveled across the world, 60 countries, but New Zealand still remain very far from me. So I hope I hope to see agriculture farm of New Zealand one day. Thank you so much. So we'll continue to engage on agri-food dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Promit?
So I'll just mention that one area of cooperation that we could also be looking at some point. India has set up a Pacific Island Forum, as some of you will know. It was an afterthought. It was set up really without India giving. It didn't think it had much traction in the Pacific, South Pacific, and so it was set up a few years ago. What to be India's surprise has been is that the Pacific Islanders have been very excited by this. And there is now an entire section of the Foreign Ministry which works on this, because we have seen the Prime Minister, Prime Minister visit Papua New Guinea, for example. And in fact, the demands coming in from a lot of these island states in the South Pacific has been quite extensive. So a lot of, for example, digital technology in places like the Marshall Islands and so on. India set up the satellite networking structures and so on. And this has become an extremely interesting extension of Indian foreign policy in a region of the world where India never really thought of itself as being a player. But it's stretched. It does not have the capacity to do all that much in those areas. So it needs help. And we're working with the Australians already in that area. And I presume that, or hope at some point, we should be working very closely with the New Zealanders on this, including hopefully in agriculture.
Thank you, Promit.
Karthiki, if I may just add
please go
one
ahead.
last thing, and I think Bhagirath, the comments you made, I couldn't help but put on my hat as the global chairman of TIE, which is the world's largest entrepreneur and investor community, and it's a give back platform. I'm sure most of you, especially in India, are familiar with the Indus Entrepreneur. We are the largest network of entrepreneurs and investors, and it's all about giving back. We are actually supporting a lot of countries, including India. Of course, we've been very deeply involved in shaping India's entrepreneur ecosystem as well as the investor ecosystem. Maybe there's an opportunity to do something and support this. To Bhagirath's recommendation, we should look at bringing those entrepreneur ecosystems together between New Zealand and India. Because the one thing is, when you bring entrepreneurs together, there's always action that will happen. Because entrepreneurs mean business and they will make it happen, right? So it goes beyond all the theoretical discussions. So I think it was a great suggestion. And I just want to thank Christine and, of course, Her Excellency High Commissioner Nita Bhushan for the time and the opportunity. And let's hope that something meaningful comes out of this.
Yes, let's hope. Thank you to all the participants here. Thank you for taking out your time to be on this panel discussion, and a very important one. Also, there's a lot to, still discuss or uncover in this space. And, this conversation has been really comprehensive and insightful. And, many new ideas have come up, of course. And I hope that, we will continue this discussion some other time, but very soon. Over to you, Christine. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Karthiki. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I absolutely love it when we sort of had three takeaways as our aims at the beginning, and then we had someone throw down the gauntlet and say, look, let's put together an agri-food centre for entrepreneurship. Well, I think that's a real tribute to the panel discussions this evening or this afternoon in India. Time is of the essence. I think that's very obvious. Long-term thinking, but we'd better get moving on this one. There's some real urgency in terms of climate issues, food needing to be produced, and other countries already making great inroads where New Zealand has great expertise. So that is the challenge. So we encourage everyone to act on what they've heard. feel free to reach out to ourselves, to Aspen and Anta, or to Institute in New Zealand to get in contact with the people on the panel and ourselves. And if you haven't already, please sign up to our newsletter so you can keep informed for the next in the series of this fantastic collaboration we have with our partner Aspen and Anta. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vidya.